Hello and welcome back to the greatest show on earth. Alaska Real Estate starts right now. I'm Chris Story. On today's podcast, we'll get to the bottom of one of the biggest issues facing our industry right now. What could the Dodd Frank Act do to your business? Jeff Lischer is here with the National Association of Realtors to shed light on this major piece of legislation. Sherrie Simmons will stop by from Alaska Housing, and we'll check in with Ginny down in the Juneau branch of Alaska USA Title Agency. Stay tuned. Miss a minute, you could miss a million.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hi, I'm Ginny Kirshner with Alaska USA Title Agency. You can find us online at alaskausatitle.com. With almost 10 years' experience in the title and escrow business, I can ensure a smooth and pleasant closing transaction for you. We have over 5 locations throughout Alaska for all your title and escrow needs. Call us today at Alaska USA Title Agency, 796-1221 here in Juneau, or our main number at 646-6498. The choice is yours.
You may have seen the NAR call to action regarding the Dodd Frank Act, and President Helen Jarrett brought this important issue to our attention in our last podcast. Still have questions? I know I did. NAR is bringing you answers all the way from Washington, D.C.
I'm Jeff Lischer. I am Managing Director for Regulatory Policy at NAR. What that means is that anything affecting regulations across the board, from environmental to FHA, the VA, to the conventional mortgages, to Fannie and Freddie, comes under my supervision. It's a practical matter, though, because financial issues have been so hot. That is where I spend maybe 75 or even 80% of my time. So issues arising with regard to mortgages other than the federal mortgages, and issues regarding the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, called the government-sponsored enterprises, the housing government-sponsored enterprises, or GSEs. Those issues are where I spend most of my time.
Could you give us a little bit of background about what led up to the Dodd Frank Act and how it could, in fact, impact our industry?
Dodd-Frank was a response to the financial crisis really of '08, when there was a risk that the entire financial structure was going to seize up. People stopped trusting each other. It was actually hard for major corporations to even borrow overnight money. There was great concern. I think this is around the fall, maybe around August or September of 2008, that this country was in very serious risk of the financial system seizing up. So Congress took a look at this situation after they got through the emergency and wanted to respond to the problem of private capital fleeing when times got tough. So private capital used to be a very important source of mortgage lending, but it no longer is. More than 90% of our mortgages are either FHA or VA, or they are purchased by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. There's almost no private capital, pure private capital involved. So what Congress said was, let's set up some standards for making sure that the people who issue mortgage-backed securities, groups of mortgages that are packaged into securities that then investors buy, providing capital into the mortgage market, so then your average home buyer can have money to get a mortgage, can have money to, so the lender has money to make that loan. What Congress said was, well, let's make sure that the people who are issuing these mortgage-backed securities really have a continuing stake in them, and that's called risk retention. And so for those packages of mortgages, the securitizers, the people that put the packages together, have to retain 5% of the credit risk. So if there's a $100 million package of mortgages, they have to retain a risk of $5 million. So that is a very significant obligation in the view of Congress. Then, however, they said, look, if it's a really, really safe mortgage, called a qualified residential mortgage, then you do not have to retain that risk. And the idea is to assure the investors that what they're getting is not going to collapse the way it did back in '08. Right now, we're looking at a proposed rule issued by 6 financial regulators defining how this credit risk system is going to work. And most important in terms of the current hot issue is this definition of qualified residential mortgage. As proposed, you'd only be eligible to be exempt from risk retention if the borrower put 20% down, met stringent debt-to-income ratios, so the amount of the mortgage could not exceed 28% of their income, and the total of all debt could not exceed I think it's 34% of their income. There are also very tight credit rules. You can't have been more than 60 days late on any loan within the last 2 years, for example. We're very concerned because something like 80% of home buyers in the last few years have put less than 20% down. Very few people, we believe, will qualify for loans that qualify as qualified residential mortgage. And we think this is important because if they don't get a qualified residential mortgage, what we call a QRM, they have to get a non-QRM mortgage. Then what's going to happen is that those, we believe, will have higher fees, much higher fees, and much higher rates, making homeownership much more expensive or even out of the reach of hundreds of thousands or millions of homebuyers.
In some respects, this could impact what these GSEs, what Fannie and Freddie look like going forward as they're restructured.
Well, that's right. And nobody really knows how Fannie and Freddie are going to be restructured. But with these regulators defining a QRM as 20%, we're concerned that the market is going to say, well, this is what the definition of a safe mortgage is. These are the mortgages that Fannie and Freddie should be permitted to buy. Everyone has to put 20% down. Right now you can put less than that down for a Fannie or Freddie loan, but you have to have private mortgage insurance with it. That may be at risk. So Fannie and Freddie would only buy if the home buyer actually came up with 20% down in cash. Perhaps that would become a justification for raising the down payment for FHA, which I believe now is something like 3.5%. There are proposals to raise that to 5% and talk of even as high as 10%. Again, the FHA and VA are exempt from the risk retention because the federal government is backing it, so of course it's a very solid investment. But if you start raising the cost of getting those loans from FHA, you are keeping more and more people out of home ownership, and if they can eventually buy a home, it will be only after 10, 15 years even of saving, because that's how long it takes to come up with 20% down, especially in higher cost areas.
The Dodd Frank Act has already passed as of last year, but this portion of it, the QRM, has not gone into effect yet?
That's right. The regulators are late, which is no particular surprise. They took until, Dodd Frank was enacted July 21st in 2010. The regulators released the rule, I think it was in March. The comments on the proposed rule are due next Friday. Now, we are working very hard with a very large coalition, not only on the substantive concerns to do with QRM, but also we are urging the regulators to defer the deadline date for the comments for a couple of months. There's a rumor in Washington that they have decided to delay it until August 1st. By the time this podcast is put out, it's possible that we will know what the regulators have decided. We will be commenting whether it's by next Friday or whether it's by August 1st or whatever the new date is for sure. And then it will take quite a long time for them to assess all the comments and figure out where to go with a final regulation. And then that will be another year before it takes effect. So between the fact that VA and FHA are exempt, this rule won't take effect for more than a year anyway, and probably quite a bit more than a year. And the rule is actually proposing to exempt Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac while they are in government receivership, which is where they are now. We are really talking about something that's going to hit the markets down the line. It's going to be a number of years before it has a major impact because of these exemptions. But when it does hit, it's going to be of enormous importance, and so we want to make sure that they get it right. We have looked at the data to see, well, is that worth it? Maybe as a public policy it's worth it. And our conclusion is that it's not, because it keeps hundreds of thousands of people away from home ownership, but it provides a very marginal improvement in terms of delinquency rates. So although you get somewhat safer loans, what really drives safe loans, what really makes the improvement is not doing payment option arms where you can pay less than the amount of the interest. Not doing exploding arms where you have a teaser rate for a couple of years and then your monthly payment can start increasing every 6 months and it can end up doubling or even tripling. Those mortgages, keep those mortgages out of the system and then underwrite very well. Make sure that the people have a sound job, that their income is documented, that their current debt obligation is understood, that they have enough money left over at the end of the day after their mortgage payment to cover all of their costs. If you do all of those things, then you have a very safe loan without denying home ownership to hundreds of thousands. So that's our basic argument.
Thanks, Jeff. Be sure to visit the Realtor.org website for more links and information about QRMs. And if you haven't already, answer the call to action. Response rate right now is at about 8% nationally.
Hello, this is Sherrie Simmons at Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, and we just want to remind you that our interest rates are terrific right now, especially for the tax-exempt first-time homebuyer and the veterans. 4.25% is what we're looking at for a 30-year loan for the first-time homebuyers, and the Veterans Mortgage Program is 4 1/8, and the first-time homebuyer taxable is even at 4 5/8. So all of those are just doing great right now. We also want to remind you that the rebate program for energy efficiency still has money. It hasn't gone away. There is a wait list, and so what's happening is people are being dispatched to their rater for that as-is rating as their names come up to the top of the list, and we're dispatching about 40 names a week right now. We're expecting some more money from the legislature. The governor hasn't signed the bill yet, but we are hoping that that money will be sufficient to keep that program going for quite some time. So we're just recommending that people get on that list, and they can contact that akrebate.com, or they can call 1-877-AK-REBATE to get on the list for that energy rebate. So think of Alaska Housing and the loan programs that we have out there for first-time homebuyers and for veterans.
I heard there was a sacred chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do ya?
Hello, this is Clair Woolnough from Alaska USA Mortgage in Fairbanks, and I would like to talk about VA loans. This is a zero-down loan with no mortgage insurance. VA will finance from a 1-unit to a 4-unit property, which includes manufactured homes and approved condos. VA does allow you to have more than one VA loan at a time. If a veteran decides to keep the original home as a rental or second home, then there may be enough entitlement remaining on their VA certificate for another VA loan.
Well, that's it for this edition of Alaska Real Estate. A special thanks to Jeff Lischer for his insights on Dodd Frank, the Alaska Association of Realtors, and of course, thank you for listening. Tell a friend today about Alaska Real Estate. Remember, if it happens to real estate, it matters to you.